dollars going like that's sounding really expensive. And I go, no, it's just we're here's your script, and you just want to like we have one of the stuff in between it that the audience is sort of like, you know, if you're a really big fan of it, you go like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way, you know. So towards the end, they were starting to go like, oh, I see what you're saying, you know, like and then they just let you do it. Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, so I just
building trust on any project.
Yeah.
The first thing you submit is always brutal because you don't have that relationship.
No, they're like always going like, what do you want, you know? And, but actually I figured it out. I just go straight to the visual effects director and go like, dude, how do we get this done? And then how much do you think it's going to cost? And then like, okay, you're going to sign off on this, right? Okay, so then it's him and me against whoever's going to you're going to do that.
I got my troop here.
Carl, he's fine with it.
Well, we work on large team projects too, though. Communication is so valuable, and like getting a through line with all the different departments or with the key people that they, like you said, sign off on it. That you're able to communicate your idea and get them to back you. I think that's super valuable on a corporate project.
Yeah, and you know what? The stuff gets even better because then when you get the like, yeah, go do it, and then you go like, oh yeah, I'm really gonna, you know, you feel empowered, and then as opposed to just, you know, look, it's a multi-million-dollar, you know, production, and let's look at it in terms of like, you know, again, extended value, and then when the show finally aired, I think people go like, wow, okay, it looks cool. It feels, you know, like, again, when I talk about value, like, I can perceive that. You know,
and that's also a thing of leadership, too. I think people get the wrong idea that because you're the writer, that you are somehow the end-all and the be-all. I'm going to write it, and you're going to do what I say. And that's totally not how these things happen. Even on a comic project where it's just me collaborating with an artist, they've got to be invested. They've got to put some of themselves into it, just like I put myself into the story process. This isn't about you on high, casting down words and they, oh, thank you so much. I like it when an artist comes to me and says, I have this neat thing, we could add this, or wouldn't it be cool if? Yeah. And even if I disagree, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's all get our ideas into this melting pot and really play with it, you know? And I think that that's a really valuable part of the working process. It is collaborative. And if you go in there all fire and brimstone, there's one way, my way, you know, screw you, like, you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
I love working with those guys.
Those are the best. Good people out there in corporate rock and roll. Yeah.
No, I've
never worked for those people.
Oh, yeah. No, I've worked with my share project where that was the case, and look, I'm happy to get paid. Just, you know, whatever.
But you see, that's the thing. That the minute when you realize that you have no investment, your brain shuts off.
Yeah, exactly.
You just go, oh, it's a paycheck.
Okay. Yeah, I will give you.
I'll do bare minimum for you. You got it.
But the worst is when there's even a hint that you might be able to like sort of contribute something, and you go like, oh, really? Okay, so you do it, and then suddenly your door shuts, and you go, oh, I thought it was going to be this. And then that's when you just literally go like, I'm taking my ball, I'm gonna go home. You know, it becomes about that. Like, oh yeah, all right, well I'm gonna go home. I'm never gonna play with you again.
Well, you're gonna pay me crap anyways. I'm gonna go make comics because I'm gonna make more on my own terms.
Oh yeah, that's good. And then I take it out on my comic, in which case my comic becomes 1,000% better. And I go like, yeah.
Chuck Dixon, he's a comic book writer. He used to say that he would watch. Whatever he watched, he would learn from. If he watched great TV and movies, he would be like, oh, those are great moments that really brought emotion out of me, or I've got to think of stories that evoke, like not copy, but evoke those types of emotions, or those types of conflicts, or those types of symbolism. And if it was terrible, it's like he would rewrite it, but with a different genre. So he'd watch like a crappy episode of some, medical drama or whatever, he'd go, okay, so if it was Batman doing this, but it was not a hospital, but it's like this and the Joker and the thing, and he would just craft the story with a better ending. He would take bits and pieces and sort of slot them in, and that can be a really weird thing where people ask me, they're like, oh, what do you think of, being an active viewer of story. Once I started writing in particular, I think people get this idea, well, how do you learn to write? Of course you have to do it, you have to get better at it. But stop being passive about your entertainment. When you look at something, I talk to people and I say, did you like movie, fill in the blank, and they'll say, oh, you know, it was all right. No, it's kind of crap. Well, what is kind of crap? At what moment did you not enjoy it? At what moment did you lose connection to the characters? At what moment were you no longer invested? At what point were you like, popcorn, I'm going to go get some of that, rather than being engaged on the screen? And having that little analysis running in the background, I find really valuable. My wife is a writer as well. She's a prose writer. I think our friends hate going to film. Because we finish a film, and after it, we're talking rapidly, like back and forth and back and forth. Oh, that moment, yeah, that was when I was, oh, really, you? Oh, I was over here. Oh, cool, yeah, well, fascinating. And if a movie's crap, and afterwards they're just like, oh, that just sucked. I'm like, no, not only did it suck, here's why it sucked. You can just do the tea leaves and just like, yeah, no, they totally lost it. There was no emotional reason for that. I no longer cared. And once I no longer cared, I wanted them all to die. In the first 20 minutes, they would all die, and I could have left. That was the end of it. And then that is such a fascinating process. We have a game that we play. We call it few moves. So it's like you watch a crappy film and you go, what is the fewest number of changes we could have made in that film to save it from itself?
That's great. Right? I do a similar thing. I'm not told anyone about this, but I call it fix it.
Fix it, yeah, same deal, right?
It was this moment
but it's
where...
not, yeah, I'm not a critic. Like, I'm not going to write my review online and tell everyone, the movie you love is God. It's like, that's not my job. But my job is to understand story to make myself a better writer. So it's my own internal criticism.
Yeah, you learn more from stuff that's broken. And you know, I teach a story class in LA, and one of the, you know, we do a lot of film studies, and I mean, you know, I show them a bunch of stuff that works, but then I go like, I'm going to show you stuff that kind of doesn't work, and then let you sort of understand why, you know, how and why, and it's not some, you know, we're not trying to assassinate, you know, these people tried to make a movie. They felt really strongly about it, and then they did it, or for whatever reason, we will never know, unless somebody actually...
Well, there's so many factors in a production like that.
Yeah.
Everyone has the best of intentions, and then it comes together, and you're like, and you have,
yeah, but...
Acts.
Definitely, the bed that eats people.
Yeah.
But there's so much to pick up, you know, in terms of, oh, all right, it's all just these choices that, they made that choice instead of that choice. And like you said, it's a right or wrong thing, but it's also just for you to go like, okay, now as I go forward, and either stuff I write or
don't make that mistake.
Yeah, or I watch something, and I'm a little more aware of like, okay. You know.
So I teach at an art college in Toronto called Seneca, and one of the courses I teach is animation history. So we watch films all the way from like, you know, Little Nemo, 1911, all the way to modern day. And watching early, like, Warner Brothers, so you got, you know, Charles Jones, before he called Chuck Jones, and you got Fritz Frelling and all those guys, and the earliest Warner Brothers cartoons, they're not funny, but all the ingredients are there. You can hear lines from Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck that should work, and they actually, in some cases, redid those jokes in later cartoons, and they did work. But it's just like, the timing's a little off, or the inflection's a little wrong.
They got better.
Yeah, there's this weird moment in some of the early Bugs Bunny cartoons where they forgot, that they didn't forget, they didn't realize what made Bugs Bunny work was that he's the everyman that gets bullied and then sort of gets his revengeance on, you know, Elmer Fudd or whoever. The early cartoons, he's the bully, like he's a total jerk. And so you get him at the 1 minute mark and you're like, God, I hope Bugs Bunny dies. It's just not funny at all. It's like a malicious, like, bully, and you're just like, Bugs Bunny, good job, pal.
We have a lot of storytellers in the audience, and I assume they can hear on the projects. Is that accurate? Yes, nodding. That's good. And so, what do you guys feel like is? Because I know a lot of people writing stories get lost along the way. It happens. And I find when I discuss these stories with them, it's often they started moving forward without sort of a set of essential ingredients.
Right.
What do you feel like is necessary for starting or really committing to the writing process? What do you like to have what pieces do you like to have on the table before you kind of really dive into it?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I always want to try and say something. That's like really, you know, that's my big sort of big piece. And again, I teach this class, I keep saying like, you want to try and say something.
What's the story
Yeah, exactly, because it's, and in this class, I try to sort of boil down these things into just simple concepts, which is like theme, and what's the big idea of the story, and then what's the lead behind for the audience, because, and the audience is you have to have the reverence for the audience, whether it's printed or whether it's animated or live action, it doesn't matter. They're great moments, or in any story, it doesn't matter what it is, when you leave a room and you felt touched or something like that, that doesn't happen by accident. It's because creators are conscious about what the audience is going to, when they walk away, long after you told your story, that it's still in their head, and they still, and that's incredible, because that's you reaching out to an audience, and it's cross cultures and whatever, and that's a very high goal. But I go, if you're not going to shoot for that, then what's the point?
I get this all the time, where I'll say to people, they'll pitch me a story. Oh, I've got this story I want to work on. I go, great, tell me about it. And I say, what is the story about?
Yeah.
And they'll always go plot.
Yeah,
Always,
plot.
There's a guy, and he's got a gun, and he's like running across a forest. It starts with a guy running across the forest, and there's these like wolves chasing him, or like whatever. It's robot, post-apocalyptic, angel, demon, unicorn, art, whatever thing. And they tell me all these stuff. They tell me stuff. And I go, that's not what the story's about. Those are things happening in the story. That's plot, that's character. I want to know what the story's about. Why does this story need to be told?
Yeah.
And what are you bringing to the story? And one of the things that people say to me, I want this to be like Blade Runner. And I go, well, we have Blade Runner. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Really like it. Why do we need pseudo photocopy Blade Runner? What can you say about people, technology, life, society that is worth making a story about? That is not just going to be, I kind of riffed Blade Runner, and wouldn't it be cool if people compared it to Blade Runner? And I went,
where do you guys think this comes from, though? Where do you
well, people love this
message
stuff.
from?
They want the
But as the
admiration
writer.
and the
Yeah,
love.
it comes from a good place. I think.
They love that thing so much that they want to be associated with something like that. And I
Oh,
get
I'm
it.
sorry. I mean, like, but where do you pull
Oh, your
the
own.
thing you want to say, the cabaret about?
Oh, like, sounds kind of weird. There's that old saying of write what you know, which I think is a kind of a false statement, because it's only half the statement. Write what you know, and try to know a lot. Have life experiences, have emotional experiences, travel, meet people, do things,
I agree, yeah.
and then bring those experiences out into your work. Not necessarily, hey, I went to another country somewhere, write about that country, but you have an interaction with a human being, and you go, or look at people, perceive the world around you, and then try and impart those things into a story about life, about love, about whatever you think is important.
Yeah, it's like thematically you want to be kind of really primal, like it doesn't need to be complicated. It's really just the basic emotions. It's love, it's hate, it's that. But you're not going to outwardly tell a story that's like, oh, it's about love, and so. But that's in the end, that's what people are going to perceive and go like, oh God, why am I feeling this?
Right.
And why is this so familiar to me? It's
right.
Because that's what's familiar to you, is the emotions familiar to you. Now, the hard part is like making things flow where you're being fed all this stuff and it still feels correct, it still feels relevant, but it doesn't feel contrived.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Is so but if you have that core concept and you feel that core concept is really deep sort of strengths to it. So I'm working on a story right now that is about that the older generation always feels frustration as they're being swept away by the new generation. And that there's always that conflict of, I was important and now you're the new important and I can't handle that. And that was sort of the juxtaposition of the story. And then it was figuring out where it was happening, who was in it. But what the story's really about is generational divides, and as one generation moves away, they can't deal with that transition. And so that's everything. Everything else is the trappings and the characters, the place.
The plot. And
it's going to make that hopefully come through. And it won't be, it's not called like generational push go. Like there's all sorts of other cool stuff. There's a supernatural element, there's all these other things. But if you had to boil it all down and distill it all away, that's what's left.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, people want to be validated. That's, I mean, when you want to go on a journey in a story, right? You go, you watch it and you go like, God, all this stuff happens. But in the end, really, it's just a validation. It's almost, you're paying off the audience. You're like, you know,
you're making a value judgment.
Yeah.
You're saying to the audience, this is what I think is important. So if you do a story, and it doesn't have to be a happy story, it doesn't have to be an uplifting story, you can say, life is about pain and we all die. That's a valid story. It's a totally valid story. And there are movies like that, and they are moving experiences. It's probably not going to be a blockbuster, you know, like hit, because people don't generally go to the movies and go, you know what, I left the theater and I wanted to kill myself. You got to check this stuff out. You're going to line up around the block for this puppy. But it's a valid story. It's just, you got to know what your audience is going to be and the viability of that audience. If you're going for mainstream summer blockbuster entertainment, people want to come out with a smile on their face. And I'm going to actually criticize a film. I don't normally do this. But compare what, for example, Marvel is doing with their superhero movies, which are always a damn good time, popcorn movie, people walk out like, Avengers, man, awesome. Yeah. And then compare that to like Christopher Nolan's DC films, where you walk out and you're like, I don't feel good. Why did Superman like Daddy no? Like, that was weird. You know? And so, but you look at those two films, and I went to both films, and you walked out of the theater of Man of Steel, and everyone was just sort of like, Superman, exactly. And in the Avengers, I mean, tons of people died in the Avengers. New York crumbled and terrible things. And you're like, dude, there was that moment when we floated around like a rag doll, and we had a great old time. That was the best. And you're like, that's what they're playing on. And I look at that trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm like, good times. Everyone knows. I don't even, like, the general audience doesn't know who those characters are, but the through line of good times is totally in that trailer. I watched the trailer for the X-Men movie, and I went, that's sad. There's a lot of sad people. That sad bald guy and sad hairy guy with the famous bald and sad guy with the claws that pop out of his hands and sad people cry time. And I don't think like people are in the theater going, man, I can't wait till sad time. X-Men, sad time. Like, I'm just like, you know, I don't know. It's just me. I'm a terrible person. I'll go see it. I like sad time. Sure.
Any other essential ingredients? Does anybody have any questions?
You want any essential ingredients?
Okay.
Questions.
So we'll do a couple of essential ingredients, and then we'll do cool questions. Any others that you have other than the about?
Just essentially, I mean, again, just the core idea of the story. I think you know, it's your again, wanting to say something to an audience. You're passionate about it. You're like, I have to tell this.
Yeah.
There's something molecularly like necessary for you to go like, I have to tell the story. It's like, you know, it's like in Close Encounters where like, I have to go to that mountain. There's that
mashed potato.
Yeah, making mashed potato. You know,
they didn't get that joke. None of them saw Close Encounters. Okay.
Come on. Yeah.
We're suggesting that you build your characters out of mashed potatoes.
And it's everything. It's like there's a, you know, and yeah, don't. I'd say write. You know, I teach this in classes to write outlines, and I go, don't do anything. Don't do any heavy lifting until you understand and
what
you can what you're trying to do. And I said, you know, writing's your friend. And I go, and they immediately think like, oh, I have to go to take a writing class. I'm like, no, it's you, a pencil and a pad of paper.
Your experience that only you can tell.
Yeah, and you just go write the whole story in like. First, write it in a sentence, right? If you can boil it down in a sentence.
And then their answer is like, no, it's more complex than that.
Going like, no,
it's not good.
Like, what happens, you know, and then
Did you
write.
see the Phantom Menace? Not good.
Exactly.
What was that story about?
Nothing.
Jar Jar.
Trade disputes.
Oh, trade disputes, right, yeah.
Another fun day in trade dispute galaxy.
Yeah, you guys saw the Red Letter Media stuff, right? That's so, God damn, that guy's genius. You know, that's my wife.
Creepy genius.
Creepy genius.
But, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's, I mean, that's how I work, and when I started mentoring people, when they wanted to learn story, and particularly storyboarding, that's how I boiled it down to. Let's start with it as I said, writing is storytelling. okay, people immediately think, let's start drawing, right?
No, it's distilling your ideas
Yeah, so-
and communication.
Yeah, and I said, because when you're writing it, you're also wrapping your head around your story. And once, in fact, for me, I'll write something, and at the end, when I finally feel like, that is exact. I actually don't even, I'll look back and I'll read back to what I was
Discovering
writing.
it again.
Yeah, and I go, wait a minute, I just suddenly figured it out while I was writing.
Yeah, well, and this is also why it's really important to get the ideas down. I have these people saying, oh, like, it's almost like in their head it's perfect because they never have to get it out. When you put it on paper and you see all the holes that are in there,
exactly.
well, that actually doesn't connect to that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But up here it was perfect, and I was already
Yeah.
autographing the finished book and everything. And that's also the difference between people who want to write and people who want to have written. I know it sounds very insulting. They want a book. Like, hey, you want a book? That's great. Go print one. But if you want to make stories, that's your goal. I love coming to the show. I love meeting people that have enjoyed my work, and I love autographing stuff or talking to people about it. But that is dessert. The meal is let's make a great story.
Yeah.
And if you don't enjoy that, that's not good. That's not good. You got to really, because that is a difficult thing, and that is a time-consuming thing. You got to have passion for the building process.
Sure.
And when you're talking about theme, when you talk about ideas, I get to put my website. On my website, so jimzub.com, Jimzub, I've got a bunch of tutorials, and one I've got a 5-part one all about the pitch. And the pitch is trying to get it down to one page, trying to get it down to one paragraph.
Yeah.
Get it from the macro, and then you go into the micro. So you start with the big idea, and then you show how you're going to present that idea all the way down in one page. And there's like, well, it's so much more complex than that, and it's not good. I want to hand one page to an editor, to a publisher, and if they like it, they'll ask me for more.
Yeah.
But don't hand them a telephone book and go, here, I just ruined your weekend.
Yeah.
Because they just won't read it. They won't get it. They won't deal. You know, and so some of my best stuff has been the simplest to explain, and the complexity comes in the building, but not in the pitching, and not in the core concept.
Yeah.
Louis, anything else you just don't or usually, if you had your way all the time?
Well, I mean, for just the comics itself, it's not until I completely, there's this thing about being the god of your world or whatever, and it's one of the things that, taking these classes, go see Rob Lucci or whatever, and then even, that's the one big thing in taking his seminar was saying, like, nothing happens in your stories that you don't know anything about. So so I said, you know what, I'm gonna do this right, I'm gonna spend the time to write the entire world backwards and forwards to the point where if somebody asked me, well, what was going to happen at, the life of this character, what's going to happen here, what's happening here, what's happening there, I could just go like, oh yeah, that's what happens. And I don't have to be sitting there going like, I'm going to make up something as I go along, in which case then you're just spinning your wheels. So so I spent the time for a while, just until, again, at the end when I explained the life of this character, from the day this character was born, in broad strokes even, then I felt like I was ready. Because then and then, in fact, I had a guy that was a friend of mine that just, he would read my stuff, and he's a great, he has no investment in it, and he'll tell me whether it sucks or not, and then, which is cool. Don't ask your mom, because your mom will say, like, oh, this is great, man.
It sucks, and then ask your mom.
And then ask your mom.
Mom, you got to pick me back up.
Exactly. Mom, please.
My mom can't remember the name of my comic.
Yeah. But he had all these questions, because he sees the character, and I go, he had all these questions, like, well, why did this happen there? And then I was blurting it out like I knew this person. And it was, and I go, wow, I know this stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know I knew it.
I knew it. So then now, when I'm doing the comic, I have an outline, but I have enough room in there to know where I'm going, to know where at that point emotionally, what is this character feeling, what are they feeling, and so I never get lost. I'm always going like, okay, yeah. Then the rest of it is just details, like, okay, her hair flips over this way because the wind's going that way. Then those are just details.
Yeah, I'm not going to play devil's advocate, but I'm going to make a point that's crucial on that. There are people who will plan endlessly without
Oh, yeah.
telling the story, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
won't. That the planning, it's like people who obsess over reading how-to books
Yeah.
because they will never do.
Yeah,
And
correct.
so don't get yourself into a state where you're not doing. The best experience is to finish things,
Yeah.
finish stories, short stories if you're just getting started, simple stories. Get them done, learn from them. That is the best experience. You can read 100 how-to books. You can read tutorials. So I've written a bunch of, great advice, whatever. But the best learning advice you'll have is by building, doing things, finishing it, and then looking back on it as critically as you can, and then trying to do better next time. And last year, I literally scripted 1,000 comic pages. That was not my plan, but that was the way all the freelance projects and my own work came together. And by the time I finished, what had happened was I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was talking about page count. I was like, I had a crazy page count. He goes, well, what was it? I don't know. And so I went back and counted these things, and scripted like over 1,000 pages. And he goes, that's why you're better now. And I went, wow. Yeah, you're right. Like, I am now the writer that can write the stuff I'm doing now. I'm not the writer that could do that a year ago or 2 years ago. And I hope that in 2 years from now, I look back and I go, what a hack. Like this, let's keep the ball rolling, And that's pure experience. You must.
Yeah, you learn by doing.
Yeah,
It's
you gotta do it.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, nothing gets done. I mean, there's stuff now I unearthed, and you said you go look at it, and you go, and you look at it because you laugh at it, and you go like,
Right.
God, it's stupid. What was I thinking, right? And then, but it's also a good measuring stick.
Well, it's kind of accomplish yourself when you realize how far you've come.
Yeah, how far you've come. You will see it. It's just it's a process. It's a muscle. It's like you're working out. And common sort of just thinking is that the more you do something repetitively, you get better.
I've got this with my students as well. By the time they finish a project, they're handing stuff in, and they're like, "Oh, I know I could have done it better." I'm like, that means that's good.
Yeah.
You can recognize you can do it better. You finish the project, and now you're the person that finished it and can do it better. But you couldn't have if you would have never.
That's a good space.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Any
Just all the time.
any questions? Maybe good. Okay, yeah. You could, if you don't want to set up the mic, that'd be great. Somebody else can line up behind her. I think we'll probably get one more in.
So you talked a lot about working in corporate environments,
When it starts, prove it.
license titles or whatever, and the struggle to kind of keep engaged with the product. And so I kind of have like 2 parts of question, but I guess for time you can answer whichever one sounds more interesting. Have you ever worked on something where there was so much interference or whatever that you just couldn't, you had to walk away from it?
Yes. Yes.
The other was have you ever worked on something that you enjoyed so much it was like your own work?
Yeah, I mean, there's I've worked on so many shows, and there's a takeaway from all those shows. I learned, but and then there's just certain shows where when you felt like you were hitting your stride and then it was over, and shows like I worked on a show called The Mighty Bee for Nickelodeon, and it was a show that every day was just a joy to work on, and the guy who created it, gave me the keys to his creation and said, go do something with it, and that was incredibly empowering, and just a great group of people. And you would hope every project's like that, but it's not. And there are places where you go, I'm going to fulfill my obligations, and then goodbye. So yeah.
Samurai Jack right now, the first couple issues I was so nervous. I sent in my first script and I was just terrified that I felt I had done the best I could do, but what would they say? And they came back, my first issue came back with literally no changes. And the editor called me and he said to me over the phone, he goes, I'm going to read you your feedback. And I was just like, oh God. He goes, approved. I went, what? And he goes, that never happens. I'm like, oh my God. And so once I got that confidence and Andy and I started riffing on each other really strong, now I feel weirdly possessive. I know Samurai Jack's not mine, and I know it never will be, but I feel like we've got this great alchemy going right now.
Right.
And I joked with, I was talking to the head of IDW the other day, and he said, we're loving the book, right? I'm like, oh, we want to keep going. How long are you on for? And I said, how long will you give me? And he goes, no, like how many do you think you can do? How long will you let me stay? You know, you're going to be shutting the door, I'm going to be like holding on. You know, I said to him, my joke number was, I said, I'm going to do 53 issues. And he goes, what? And I said, there's 52 episodes of the show and I want to have one more. And he goes, ooh, ballsy. I'm like, yeah. I don't know if we'll ever get there, and I know we'll get those kinds of numbers, but that's how committed I feel now, and that's how good of an impression that's the experience that I've had there, so, yeah.
Hi, so you guys all have these kind of side projects that you feel like are stories that you're not able to tell through your corporate jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a student who's studying animation currently, and I want to break into the industry, but I'm worried that the storytelling that I want to do is going to be forced into these kind of side projects. And I'm just wondering what your perspective on is if the stories that you feel like you want to tell but aren't as marketable can ever become
You have
these
so many
corporate
more outlets now than ever before, like the internet, this thing. I mean, you putting films up on YouTube, or if it's animation, right? Or, I mean, no one can stop you from doing that. Your own independent production, put it up on Vimeo. If it's a comic book and you're putting it on the web, you don't need a publisher, you don't need a printer, you don't need anyone to tell you what to do. You can do your corporate stuff, and you can make your money and pay your rent. And if that's not fulfilling enough, if that doesn't fill the creative well, then you have such phenomenal outlets to be able to do the things the way that you want to do them. And don't think that you have to, you know, correspond to your corporate day self.
I was just
to
wondering
do
if you
that.
think there's any way that these may be combined in the future. How would these obstacles that people feel like certain stories aren't marketable, or...
Well, the great thing is that the internet's the ultimate leveling field, because something can become crazy popular on its own merits. You know, McDonald's.com is just as close as skullkickers.com, my website. You type it in, you go to the website. There's has a little more money in it. But the point is that you... What's that? It's pretty good. But the point is, though, is that it's all equidistant. And so it's about the merit of the work. You know, the biggest comic right now is not Superman or Batman or Spider-Man. It's Penny Arcade. And they have millions of readers, and they have a convention, and they are a brand that's known around the world. And they're two guys that made the stories and the things that they wanted to do. And if that doesn't empower you to feel like you have the ability, then I don't know what else to say, because that's the media that we're living right now. And that's what's possible with the right idea at the right time. It's not to say that we all deserve to be millionaires, but that you are not limited in the ways of previous generations.
No, and I mean, essentially, you'll get to a point where you go, if you feel strongly enough about, you know, and I know enough people that said, you know what, I'm going to take, I'm going to step away from animation to make my own stuff. And they go,
Say someone left Disney, for
yeah,
example.
so let's just say theoretically someone who's doing work
That would be the most foolish thing I could possibly.
Yeah, right? No, and they said, I'm going to, in the end, it's like, they felt so strongly about, you know, there's this thing in Hollywood, it's like, you know, directors are trying to get their stuff funded and they never do it, and guess what? In the end, they go, I'm going to borrow the money to make it.